If you have ever wondered how wholesalers and investors are getting their deals off the market, my name is Vena. I'm 22 years old, living here in Seattle, and I have done a bunch of these off-market deals, and I'm going to show you today exactly how to start finding them. So what is an off-market deal? These are deals that have not hit the real estate market, so a lot less people are seeing them. So the people who are finding the deals, whether they are selling them to other people or keeping for themselves, they get to make a lot more money because there are less fees and they have a little more control over the deal. So we know typically when a normal buyer wants to buy a house to move into, they're going to use a real estate agent. They're going to look at Redfin and Zillow to see the listings that are available. What we do in the off-market space is find those sellers first before they've gone to the market and before the rest of the buyer competition has seen them. Depending on your state, because the laws can vary a little bit, realtors will use these strategies to find deals off the market for their buyers when they can't find anything on the market. Wholesalers are primarily operating off the market because there's just way more advantage to selling the deals when not a lot of people have seen them and there's not a lot of competition. And then investors, like people who just buy properties for themselves, can use this to find their own rentals without paying realtors and going through those extra costs associated with going on the market. So I'm literally going to go through and demo exactly how I pull lists of owner information, how I call them, what I say, how much these things cost, what my schedule looks like for prospecting for them. And stick around to the end because I'm going to have some live cold calls with sellers so you can see exactly what that looks like to set an appointment. So let's get into it. We're going to start here on Property Radar. Now, I use Property Radar. It's a little bit like PropStream, which is a little more popular, but I find Property Radar to be a little more accurate. We're going to go in here and we're literally going to tell it exactly the type of property that we want a list of. So this is an aggregate of all the information on public record of houses. I'm going to start out by picking an area. I live in this area, which is like South King County, right beneath Bellevue in Seattle. And this is where I live. This is my neighborhood. If you're just starting out and you have no idea where you should be looking, honestly, the best places to start looking for properties are going to be ones where there's lots of old houses and lots of new houses. So they're knocking down old houses to build new houses. You know, there are builders in those areas who are buying property there. Also, if they're just flipping the houses, same kind of deal. You also want to be in heavily populated areas where there's high demand for housing, where there's a lot of people moving in, like the big city, like Seattle, even Bellevue. When you know there's a demand for housing, you know that you're going to find buyers like flippers to buy your deals. And 99% of the time, we are wholesaling distressed properties. So these are houses that are worn down condition. They're old. They've been typically owned for a long time. The owners are just ready to move on, and we want to help them do that. I live like kind of suburban area. It's okay. And honestly, if you don't feel comfortable going to the big city or not too familiar with the area, but you know your own backyard has some flipping going on, it's kind of desirable, just start there where you know really well, because honestly, you're going to make better connections with your sellers and kind of have a higher conversion rate of getting them to work with you and getting the deal. And you could 100% just become familiar with the more popular area. So for me personally, I am always looking around South Seattle. That's kind of my bread and butter, a little bit in North Seattle, but typically I'm looking right over here. So you can also see here that there's a lot of colored dots going on. These are price points. So red is more expensive. This is the most expensive neighborhood in Washington, right here in Medina. And then yellow is least expensive. And then orange is a tier below that, green is a tier below that, and then dark green is the cheapest. So when it comes to wholesaling, price range wise, I would say you want to be kind of in the middle, the mid range. So here in Seattle, that's like the honestly $400,000 to $800,000 range. And if you know your areas, then you know pretty well what that kind of looks like. Yellow in Seattle is like $1 million plus, red is like 2 million plus. And so Bellevue is a generally really expensive area. So is Kirkland. Here in Washington, Kirkland, I know from just being in the space, is going to be a lot of new construction. So is Bellevue. They are knocking down old houses to build grand mansions and bigger houses. So we're going to go in here and pick an area. I have lists already for South Seattle. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to pick Renton because this is my neighborhood. As you can see, there's some green. This is the lower end of Renton. Up here is the nicer end. I know here in Newcastle where this yellow is, it's a low turnover rate. Like people aren't moving in and out of here too often because this is where a lot of the families live. This is where the good schools are. This is a pretty interesting thing to see right here is Kennydale neighborhood. It's a lot of some green, a lot of yellow, and some red. That tells me that there are some lower end properties, but these dots of higher end tells me that they are knocking down the lower end properties to build more expensive houses. So that tells me that my neighborhood is pretty valuable. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the little tool here that lets you pick your area, and I'm just going to draw my circle. So I'm actually going to pick this area here, and then it's going to tell us, I'm going to go ahead and include those expensive properties. It doesn't hurt. And it's going to tell us exactly how many properties there are in this area here. So 21,000 properties. That's fine for now. As we add more filters, this number is going to reduce. Depending on what you're trying to do, I would say anywhere from 500 to 7,000 properties is a solid list to start prospecting on. So we've got our area, and now we're going to go here to search. And what's pretty cool about Property Radar is that they have these quick lists. So like investors, you can get the absentee owners, the free and clear owners. My lists are a version of these lists with a couple of tweaks, and you can actually find my list down below. I'm going to take you right through them, but just so you have them, there's going to be a link down below to a Property Radar that has my filters attached. First thing, I'm going to go to property. I'm going to go to property type. This is important because I'm going to click off single family and multifamily 2 to 4. This is 2 to 4 units, which is duplex to fourplex. I'm not really looking for 5+ multifamily. I'm not looking for commercial, not necessarily looking for vacant land, but actually that one couldn't hurt. Not looking for any of this. And I definitely don't want condo. You can wholesale condos, but I personally am looking for properties that I can buy. And so I want to start with the things that I could buy. And then if it's not a deal for me, I'll wholesale it. That's how I normally operate just in general with working off the market. I'm going to add these, and already you'll see that we go from 21,000 to 18,000. So we knocked out 3,000 properties that we were never going to want. Next thing, I'm going to go to owner. And as you can see, this gets pretty thorough. You can go by owner age. You can go by marital status. This is a big one. Owner occupied. You can pick if the property is occupied by the owner or if it is non-owner occupied, which is usually like a rental, right? So you can go after landlords specifically, or you can just go after all homeowners. And I am typically on a basic list. Like on my first list, I'm probably going to just go with everybody, but it can be very helpful to make one owner occupied list and one non-owner occupied list so that you know who you're calling. Now, typically, if it's non-owner occupied and it's a rental property, these owners are going to be a little more savvy. So if you're totally new to the real estate space, these people might know a little bit more than you, and it might take some learning curve to talk to them. I will say that can be a limiting belief, and I truly believe you don't need much skill to just start making calls, but it can be helpful to separate out your owner and your non-owner occupied list. If you find my filter list down below in that Property Radar link, there will both options will be there. You can get my non-owner occupied and my owner occupied list. We want to go to actually transfers. So most recent change of ownership, I'm going to pull their purchase date, and I want properties that were purchased like 20+ years ago. So they've owned it for more than 20 years. Makes it more likely that they might be done with the property and ready to go. Yes, there could be people with 19 years. So you could go like 15 years or more, 12 years or more, 10 years or more owned for. I just feel like the longer they've owned it, the more likely they are to be motivated. So purchased before January 31st, 2003. And that, look at that, that already narrowed us down. I think it was 18,000 to now 6,000. And that's a solid list. This is kind of implied since the property's been owned for 20+ years, but I'm going to go ahead and narrow down by year built. So if the house was built max 1990, then I want it. The primary structure of the property could be 20 years or more is what we want. Minimum 20 years, but I actually like to just pick year built because this one's more likely to be accurate. So we go from 6,200 down to 5,200. Okay, good. And see, our properties have been owned for 20 years or more, and most of them, as you can see, were built before 1990. So this is a good list for me. Honestly, it's a pretty big list. Depending on what you do and how you prospect your list, typical ways are going to be cold calling and mailing and door knocking, texting, emailing, etc. Depending on which one you do, you're going to want a different size list. If you have a cold calling dialer, which is a program like Mojo Dialer that just calls the numbers for you and you just sit there and wait for someone to pick up, then a big list is fine because you're going to be able to go through a lot of numbers. So you want a big list. But if you are just putting this in an Excel sheet and dialing one by one, then you're going to want a way narrowed list. So if you're someone who's ready to buy a property and you know exactly what you want, get in here, put in all the filters and get really, really specific. You can go by bedroom count. You can go by square footage. You can go by lot square footage. This is actually one that I will put in sometimes because I don't necessarily want lots that are small, especially when I'm dealing in a neighborhood where there's a lot of new construction. Builders look for something minimum, especially depending on the zoning. You can also filter by zoning. This is a great baseline. Depending on what you want to do and your bandwidth, then you can narrow down. But I will say, if you plan to prospect, like crazy, go ham on it, then yeah, pull a big list like this. That being said, another popular filter is equity. So within Property Radar, you can filter by their estimated equity in dollars. You can go by their percentage. I'll go by percentage. And I like to put in like minimum 50% equity. You can go minimum 80% or 100% equity so that you know that there's a lot of money in their property that they can cash out. And on the other end of the spectrum, if they're low equity, they might be upside down on their house and need some help in that respect. So like I said, depending on what you're going for, you can mess around with the equity percentage. So that is my basic filter set. I'll go ahead and hit make list, and then I'll give it a name, and then it's going to show up over here under my list. So as you can see, I've got a lot of lists. I have filtered by owner age. I have filtered by equity percentage. I have filtered by zoning, absentees. So once I have my list, there's a couple things you can do from here. Obviously, you're going to want to export your list. Within Property Radar, you can skip trace and purchase the owner phone numbers and emails, and it's pretty reasonable in pricing. And my favorite thing about Property Radar compared to other platforms, because I've used quite a bit of other ones, Property Radar is my favorite because the owner data is very accurate. It really sucks when you buy a list of numbers and then you can never even reach the right people, and only 1 in 10 of the people you talk to when you're dialing numbers is the right owner, and they're all wrong numbers. So for that reason, it's really important that you have accurate data because you don't want to sit there wasting your time with wrong numbers. So for example, right here, this is a list of 1,800. If I click purchase phones, you actually get an included balance every month depending on your plan that you have with Property Radar. But let's see here. So for example, with this list, we'll go here to actions and hit purchase phones. Out of 4,908 properties, they found 4,860 phone numbers, which is really good. I have 250 included monthly, and then it comes out to about $360 for a list of 4,800 phone numbers, and that is going to last you a really long time. So right here, 370. I mean, this is just an example. And at 8 cents a record, that's very competitive. Most sites are going to be 11 to 12 cents a record. So this is great pricing. And so what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add my balance. I'll hit purchase, and then it's going to download my Excel file. So that's how we build the list. From there, I'm going to open up they're going to give you an Excel or a CSV file. You're going to want both. Typically, if you just download the CSV file, then it's going to open in your computer as an Excel, so you'll get both. If you use a dialer like Mojo Dialer, then you just plug it in. They give you the instructions on how to do it. You give them your CSV file. They're going to load up your phone number, and you'll be able to start dialing. And so dialers range from like $50 to $200 a month, just depending on which one you get. Typical is going to be like 120 to 160. I recommend a multi-line dialer because if you have a single line dialer that's just dialing one person at a time, even though you don't have to physically put in the phone numbers, a typical example of a dialer is Mojo. I use Mojo for years. and they're a great dialer. And so in order to start locking up these contracts, we have to get in contact with the owners, right? That's why we pulled the list and got the phone numbers. Then you throw them into here and you start calling them. Now, pulling these lists and calling them yourself is the best way to find deals because you are doing it 100% yourself. You own the deal. If you get it under contract, you are contacting the owner before everyone else. Even if cold calling is saturated in your market and a lot of people are doing it, you never know who's going to say yes to you. I'm going to have some vlogs coming up soon, if they're not already up by the time I post this video, of me cold calling and going more into what the cold calling aspect looks like. Right now, this is how I pull the list and kind of all the things you can do with the list. It's going to seem a little daunting at first because like, oh, it's calling multiple people. What if someone picks up? You just plug in your list to this dialer, you hit literally play, and then it's going to start calling. And literally, like when you cold call, you just sit here, the platform will connect to your phone and you wait for people to pick up and you just have conversations with them. And then it's cool because within the dialer, they give you the option to add notes and statuses on how everything's going and when to follow up with people and things like that. All cold calling is, especially with a dialer, is manually filtering through the list and finding the people who are motivated. So a lot of people are going to say no. Obviously, you're just calling homeowners in an area. There's no guarantee they're going to be willing to sell their house to you. You are just going through and looking for the people who are. And that is the beauty of the off-market deal because you found it before anyone else did. So the second thing you can do if your list is smaller or if you are looking for yourself and you want to be very detailed about these leads, because I will say if you're dialing a huge list on a dialer, then yes, you're picking out your lead, but all those properties are not going to be great. So if you have a super filtered list, then you want to make sure that you are able to contact every single person on the list. Basically, I'm going to create a spreadsheet of the properties. And this is also a good way to ease yourself into prospecting. So some people only do one thing, like they will only cold call, they will only send mail. And some people will do a couple things and some people will do all the things. And me personally, I do both. So I will sit there and cold call for hours and hours because I do like it. And it's a good way to kind of sift through big lists and just pick out the leads. And then I have my super filtered list of criteria that I'm looking for in a personal house for me to buy that I actually want to go through and make sure that I'm able to contact every single person on that list and find out whether they're willing to sell or not. So I suppose the difference between mass dialing a big list and hand dialing and hand prospecting a small list is that with the big list, you're only filtering out people who you know want to sell and you don't really care about the rest of the leads. And so if someone doesn't pick up, it's just at the bottom of the list, it's gone. But on a small list, if you are intentionally trying to find every single person on the list and contact them and have some kind of conversation with them, then you're going to make sure that no properties slip through the cracks. So like I said, I do both. I think both of these strategies are great. Third option is to mass email or mass mail or mass text. I also mass mail. So that's the third thing I do. With those strategies, those are more passive marketing. So it's a great addition once you have some capital to play with and use check equity to find deals. Because if I send out a mail to 6,000 people, I only hear from the people who are calling me, right? It's only incoming leads. It's not outgoing, active, me, myself prospecting. What I do is I will download the list off of Property Radar, and here it is. And I will go through each one of these. And so my process with the small list strategy of going through every single address is first thing, I will go through the whole list and put every single address into Google Maps and basically virtually drive the list for dollars and find out if I want to prospect this property based on how it looks on the outside. Now, don't always judge a book by its cover, but in general, this is how I like to filter out my list. I'll put in the address. Looks like this one's a multifamily. It's this one. You can zoom into the house number and make sure it's accurate. This is 10714. Yep, it's this property. And just in general, I'm always going to say yes to a multifamily. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to highlight based on the condition. This one's honestly medium, but I want to prospect it. So property I want is blue. If I don't want it, I'll just leave it blank. If it's like really bad, like A+ property, like super beat up, then a different color, right? So I'll go down and I'll color code my whole list. But from there, I'll go in and I will start calling the properties that I marked as ones that I really want to go after, because out of a list of maybe like 1,000, maybe half of them will be something that you actually want to pursue. And that just makes it easier and more efficient in the time that you are prospecting, because if you are looking at the property and then deciding if you want to call them and then going through that and then looking at the next property and then, you know, going through that, as opposed to going through all of them at once and looking at them on Google Maps. You can also drive for dollars and put them in an app like Deal Machine and drive the list manually, but like in this economy, gas is expensive, so I like to virtually drive it. You can't always see them all on Google Maps either, and in that case, then you can go drive by, you know, the ones on your list that you couldn't find on Google Maps. It's just more efficient to classify your properties first, and then that way when you're ready to call, you're just one phone call after the other and you're going through the list. After I've called the list, I will go and mail and door knock the people who I couldn't catch on the phone. The whole thing about going through a list manually like this, you can also put this in a CRM. I like to just use Excel. That's what works for me. If you want to put this in a CRM like in Velo or Follow Up Boss or Podio, be my guest. But it's like, if you have all these properties and if you're going to put them in a CRM, you're going to end up throwing a lot of them away anyway. Overall process: classify the properties by how they look. Start with calling them because it's just efficient. You can call through a whole list pretty quickly. Overall, with this strategy, you're making sure that less properties slip through the cracks. The other thing too with this strategy versus mass dialing is that if you are really going through and looking and tracking down every single owner who can't be contacted by phone, then you're beating everybody who is mass dialing because they couldn't catch them by phone either, right? It's pretty likely. An owner's name just isn't in public record, and no program, no property radar, PropStream, Batch Leads could find their phone number, and you're the one going to the door and knocking, then you have an edge. So those are the basics. And then if you mail out, like I mail out with open letter marketing, I personally send out 6,000 cards a month. I really like their postcards, like their small postcards, sending out around 6,000 at roughly 48 cents. That's less than $3,000 a month is what I spend on postcards. I think if you're going to go mail, then you got to send out at least 1,000 to be effective, which would be 500 a month. So it kind of depends on what you want to do, how much capital you have to spend. You can start cold calling for less than $500. So that is pretty much the laydown on how I build my lists. And I will refresh my list every 6 months. Really, it should be every month, just depending on how much you're doing it. If you have like a small list, if that's your strategy, then you don't need to refresh it too much. And in a case like that, you actually can just go down, and if you really can't track someone down, then you can use other online resources. You can look them up online, find their Facebook profile, things like that. Always the number one goal with doing this is you want to find appointments. So you want to get in front of sellers. That's the whole point of prospecting for off-market deals. You want to get in front of the seller before everyone else has, before the realtor has, before another investor has, so that you can have control of the deal. If you want my filters, check them out. There's going to be a link in the description to Property Radar so that you can get it too. This video is sponsored by them, and when you use my link, it supports the channel. So I would really appreciate it if you did. They even give you a 3-day free trial. Honestly, just go in there, pull your list, just maybe keep it for a couple months, and then go ahead and just prospect from there. I'll leave a link to the dialer system and open letter marketing as well, so you can check them out. Still own that?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. I'm calling because I'm working with some clients who want to buy in this area. I was just curious when you may plan on selling.
With the interest rates where they're at and everything, I haven't really been able to find anything I'm interested in, so I'm probably going to wait it out a little bit longer.
Okay, I hear ya. You're waiting for interest rates to maybe come down a bit for your next purchase.
Yeah, or the price points to match.
I hear ya.
Yeah, interest rates are now.
Right, yeah, for sure. Hey Doug, this is Vena with Michael J. Real Estate. I'm a local realtor here in Tacoma. I was calling about your property on 10th Street. Do I have the right person?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah, I'm calling because I have some buyers that I'm working with looking for property around here. I was just curious when you might plan on selling.
Probably beginning of spring or whatever.
Beginning of spring or whatever. Okay, well that's good. How long
Yeah,
have you
somewhere
owned?
around March, April.
March,
A long
April.
time.
Owned it for a while. Okay. Are you making improvements on it or?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yep, remodeling it.
Okay, good for you. You got contractors in there or
Yeah.
do you do the work?
I do the work, and I got a friend of mine that does it. I just do it when I get time.
Okay, nice. And you're looking at March, April. Is that when the work's gonna be done?
Yes.
Okay. Huh, interesting. Yeah, like I said, I'm a local realtor around here. I've got a couple buyers who are, local families looking for something to move into. They're upgrading to one and 1,000 square feet about.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'd say probably 800 on the bottom, I'd say a good 1,000.
Yeah, I've got my own flip cooking on 56th Street. It's gonna be done next week, actually.
Yeah, I've had rentals for a long time, and the people are just, you can get good ones, and you get one bad one, and they
Ruins the whole thing.
I'm not sure what the market will be then.
Yeah,
I know,
that's fair.
I think right now Zillow high is about $399, and they're always low.
Cool. Would you be open to a second opinion on that value? I could take a look at it for you.
Oh yeah, Give me a text on this number or whatever like that. But
Okay.
I'm just guessing. I'm
Yeah.
guessing somewhere around the mid fours.
Okay, sure. Are you usually there at the property? I go down there a couple times a week to check on my house.
No, you swing by and look at the windows, whatever you want to do.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I'll send you a text right now too, so I'm not too random of a number in the future.
Okay.
Okay, I appreciate your time, sir. I'll
Thank
talk
you.
to you soon. So that's a laydown on how I build my list. I have other videos up on my channel of the full process of wholesaling and buying for that matter, from the appointment to the close. This one, I really just wanted to hone down and show you exactly how I create my list, how I think about which area I'm prospecting, and my exact system that I use to prospect for these sellers. Like I said, the number one goal is always meeting and looking to get in front of the seller. That is how you get control over your deal. That's how you get it before everyone else. It's how you make the big bucks. Hopefully this video helped you. If you did, I would really appreciate a like and subscribe. Check out the links below for all the programs I use to get these deals. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one.